So this season is really just diving headfirst into a ton of plot, and I'm very excited about it. But with that said, hello everybody, welcome back to the channel, welcome back to another one of our weekly My Next Life as a Villainess X discussion videos. Today we're here to talk all about episode 3, I Was Captured. But before we get into that, quick reminder if you haven't done so yet, to hit that subscribe button and ring that bell, set notifications to all, let all of AnyTube know that you're here, and without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into this week's episode, shall we? And I'm not gonna lie, there are 3 big things I want to talk about this week, and I think the biggest thing is probably the mystery at play right now, because there is a lot going on, and I mean like a lot, like a lot. I'm genuinely surprised. I was talking with the Rank Cafe crew not that long ago about how Villainess might be the show that I'm most excited for week to week this season. I do think it's the strongest show, like non-sequels and sequels all pulled together. I think it's probably my favorite show of the season, and it's legitimately a lot stronger than I think season 1 was, and I already loved season 1, but I think these first 3 episodes set a much more intense precedent than we've faced during season 1. Season 1 had fun elements for the most part that were front and center, whereas a lot of the story stuff was saved till the very tail end, right? We got some story elements at the beginning, but then it was mostly fun and games with the harem until the end, right? Where the story really ramps up and sort of takes center stage again, whereas this season feels very much focused on the plot and the story elements that are going to be driving the narrative, right? It feels a lot more Game of Thronesy, and I don't mean latter half of Game of Thrones, of course. I'm talking about the good half of Game of Thrones, like seasons 1 through 4, right? Where it was still super intriguing and very good. That's actually the vibe I'm getting, where it's this sort of it's a Game of Thrones, you know? It's a literal Game of Thrones, although one throne in this case, the throne for the kingdom between the different members of the Stewart family. And I do think it's pretty interesting, right? Because we saw last week Katarina get captured, right? She got kidnapped by somebody. And I was correct in assuming that it was Rufus, right? Rufus being the blue-haired butler character who, kidnaps Katarina. Or we see in the OP, I assumed that it was going to be him who captured Katarina. And yeah, a lot of people pointed out, yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I also felt the same. It's and again, they did a good job at sort of establishing him in the OP, so that by the time you see this figure approach Katarina, who is taller than her, and he has the white gloved hand and all that stuff, it's very clear who it is and what's happening. But we don't know, why at the beginning of the episode. We just know that it's, for some reason, Rufus is involved, and also Selena, which was a surprise. So if you don't remember, of the Stewart family, there is our boys Gerald and Alan, and then there is Ian and Jeffrey, who are the older brothers who we meet this season. And if you don't remember, Selena is Ian's fiance, and she's the one who orchestrates this kidnapping, right? That was a surprise. I was a little confused by that. At first, I thought maybe she was kidnapping Katarina because she got information that somebody else was going to try to kidnap her and she was trying to help her, but in actuality, no. We find out the big mystery of this week's episode is that, why was Katarina kidnapped? And we find out through Selena that it's because she wanted to make things easier for Ian, right? See, Ian is up for the throne, but a lot of people in the capital want Gerald on the throne, right? They want Gerald on the throne and not Ian. Jeffrey is also up for contention for the throne as well. So Ian and Jeffrey are already going toe-to-toe for the right to the throne. Whereas Gerald and Alan, they're the youngest of the 4, so they weren't really being considered. At least I don't think they really considered themselves as being in the running. Whereas people amongst the king's court really feel like it should be Gerald next and not Ian or Jeffrey, which I do find very interesting. But knowing this, Selena tries to find a way to be useful to Ian, because she felt all this time that she hasn't been very good or useful to him, and that breaks my heart, because it I understand that, right? Getting into getting into a relationship and then feeling like you're not as good, right? That broke my heart a little bit, I'm not gonna lie. And I don't know, I just felt for Selena. I've been in like past relationships where that's the case, and I felt for her in that, right? And like I feel like everybody can. Everybody's been the person who maybe had some people had high expectations for you, and you didn't quite live up, and now you sort of feel somehow responsible when in actuality you did nothing wrong, right? Like everybody's been Selena at some point. So I liked seeing Katarina like try to bring Selena back from that dark place, and she does by the end of the episode, but doesn't exactly go, their way. Katarina's still kidnapped by the end. But I did like Selena's resolve throughout the episode, and I think like the reasoning is intriguing, right? Like the idea that she's just trying to clear Katarina out so that Gerald will relinquish his, what would you call it? Trying to give up his right to the throne, essentially. And as soon as you say that, you can't take it back. So if that's said, Gerald can't take the throne back. Like, it's just not possible. So that's why they kidnapped her, right? Except that's not the case. Since, like, when they're leaving, when Selena's leaving Katarina's room, she gets knocked out by Rufus with, like, some mind magic. Some mind bullets. Not that she's dead. She just passed out. And Rufus reveals that her letting Katarina go would actually be against his plans, right? And she's like, what plans? What are you talking about? And Rufus is like, well, I need her to take the fall for your kidnapping, and then I'm going to get rid of her, and then I'm going to get rid of Ian, and I'm going to make sure before I do any of that I get rid of you, right? So it's like, okay, so now we know that Rufus, the butler guy, who spends most of the episode like in full Purple Man mode, just brainwashing the hell out of poor Selena, spends most of the episode being incredibly shady, right? Like he's doing this Purple Man thing where it's like, don't you think it's time for bed, right? Like stuff like that. It's like, it's very creepy. Her eyes even turn purple, by the way. Like, I'm not just making the Purple Man thing up. Like, it's true. But he is also very clearly like, he has his own ulterior motives. But judging off the way that he ends the episode by saying, like, I need to get rid of all these people and then you, but he doesn't mention Jeffrey or Alan, right? Like, so it's like, okay, so it's very clear that he's working for one of the other brothers. And since I highly, highly, highly doubt that it's Alan, it's clearly Jeffrey, which makes sense. He's voiced by Koyasu, who does love to play his more villainous roles, so that makes sense. But yeah, it does seem like Rufus is either working for himself and has his own ulterior motives outside of Jeffrey, or he's working for Jeffrey, right? Trying to get Jeffrey to ascend to the throne and not Ian or Gerald, which would make a lot of sense to me. I think if it's Jeffrey, it just makes the most sense. But Rufus is also just spends the episode being a bastard, But I did love his presence. I thought he had great energy. Toriumi did a great job as Rufus. I thought that they absolutely nailed it. There was definitely this like duplicitous energy to the character that I think they absolutely nailed. I was very much impressed with the performances this week across the board. Katarina did, as usual, just nails it. Like, I think a lot of the stuff with Katarina is great, but the mystery this week is very intriguing, right? And that's not just, like, the only mystery. It's not, like, just why was Katarina kidnapped. There's also, like, little things, right? Like, when the group is trying to figure out what to do, Raphael shows up, or as I like to call him, Serious Deke, because Serious Deke is too good of a name to give up. Serious Deke shows up and says, like, don't worry, she's safe. Right? And they're like, okay. And then, like, we'll save her. And I'm like, what does that mean? Like, what does Sirius know that he's not sharing? Like, Sirius knows something. So, like, so what does he know? And what does will save her mean? Like, who is we, right? Like, what is he talking about? Like, the ministry, I guess, right? Because they do establish that, like, after last season, Sirius went to go work with the ministry, so maybe like these magic cops are gonna go find Katarina. That'd be my guess, but like, did they know the whole time where she is? Like, are they the ones keeping her safe? Like, I'm very curious. Is maybe Rufus in on it? Like, is Rufus like a triple agent or something? I don't really know, but the fact that Raphael knows, I find super, super interesting. And I want to know, like, what's going on with him this season, because Raphael's always going to be interesting because of, like, the very nature of his character. But another mystery, too, is how does Anna know who Katarina is, right? Because like we know that there's this other maid, right? What was her name? Lana. Sorry, Lana. Anne is the maid that we know. It's Lana, not Anne. My mistake. Too many names now. The cast is getting huge. Lana is the maid that Katarina meets while being kidnapped, right? And Lana has to tell her like, no, Anne is your maid. I'm Lana, right? But Katarina brings up like, how does she know Lana? Because Lana says like, oh, you're just like all the stories said. And Katarina's like, do I know her? Right? And she like looks at her face and is like really analyzing it. Like, how does she know her? And like that made me go like, who is Lana? Right? Is Lana Achan? Like, I don't think so. Because like we know that if Achan is anybody, it's Sophia. Because we see her like kind of speak through Sophia a few times during season 1. So I don't think it's Achan. And I also don't know if we'll even get Achan this season, because last season felt very final, right? She is in the OP, so we might get something with Achan this season, but I don't know. I don't know what's going on with Achan or Lana, right? Like Lana, like that whole line from Katarina, and I'm like, this show has taught me not to miss lines like that. So the fact that Katarina's like, do I know her? Right? It's like, maybe? Like I wonder if Lana might not turn out to be somebody that we've either already met or somebody who has some kind of past connection to Katarina. But that's not the only things that there is to talk about this week. There is also the greatness that is Mary and Alan. Now, Mary and Alan are two of like my favorite characters in the show, which is saying something because I feel like most of the characters in this series are just fantastic. Again, the cast is getting huge to the point where I'm like starting to forget names now. But Mary and Alan have always been two characters that I really, really love, right? And I think this week, seeing them like dealing with the disappearance of Katarina was really good because we see like their different takes, but also how they're there for each other. Now, we know in the OG Fortune Lovers that Mary falls for Alan, right? That Mary falls in love with Alan. But we also know that there's a possibility that the player character gets with Alan, in which Mary sort of reluctantly accepts and like supports the relationship, right? So now that we see that the two of them are together, but they're both in love with Katarina, we see how they still work so well as a duo, that these two were legitimately written to be together, so they are literally made for each other, right? That because of the script that they were given, right? Because of like the very nature of their characters, they are supposed to be together. So even when they're both in love with Katarina and don't actually feel like a real strong romantic connection, because I do feel like there is a romantic connection between them, but it's not strong enough, and it's not as strong as their love for Katarina. Like you see how even when they're apart, right? Even when they're not romantically linked, they're still really, really good partners, right? Alan basically spends the episode like confessing that he loves someone else, only to have Mary basically say like, you know what though, I'm not gonna lie, me too. But Mary's the one who says like, let's stay engaged, because Alan tries to say like, if you want to break it off, I understand, but there is someone that has my heart, right? And Mary tells him the same thing, that there's somebody who she's pining for, and even if it seems impossible, she's still gonna try her best to win the day. And it's so funny because they both just don't say Katarina's name, but it's so obvious who they're talking about. But they choose to stay engaged, right? So no matter what, they're still engaged to each other and they're still partners, right? And the fact that they both decide that they're gonna like run off and save Katarina together just has great energy, right? I do think out of the show's many ships, Mary and Alan is the one that I think I like the most, right? I do think it's Mary and Alan, maybe not the most, but it's up there for one of my personal favorites. I think it's just a super strong ship. And I do wonder if Katarina picks one person, if the others will sort of fall into the relationships that they're supposed to be in by the game's logic. Like that would be kind of interesting if like Katarina picks somebody and then Mary and Alan just like realize their feelings. Like that'd be kind of cool, because I do want those two to get together. But the other thing that I want to mention is Gerald. So Gerald, or Gerudo, as people in the comments love to try to get me to say. But Gerald spends the episode sort of in his own emotions, right? We see him, like, sitting in his office, well, maybe not his office, but his study, like, wondering what it is that he's supposed to do, only to receive a letter basically saying that Katarina has been kidnapped and that the only way to get her back is to relinquish his right to the throne. And now, the Gerald that we know is very much in love with Katarina, right? That's always been the case, but now presented with this huge dilemma of, like, do I save Katarina or do I fight for the throne? And if given the option, when confronted by the others, like, what should we do? Gerald says, I might just relinquish my right to the throne. Right? Like, he's legit willing to just give up his everything, right? Like as a prince, you would give anything to become the king, right? But Gerald's willing to throw that away if it means that Katarina is safe. And he gives this, like, genuine thought. It's not like he's doing it because, like, it's cliche and he's, you know, in love with Katarina, so therefore he has to do it. We see him, like, contemplating what to do for most of the episode until he does tell the others that he'd be willing to just sacrifice the throne to save Katarina. But we see him throughout the episode thinking about it, right? Like, unsure of what to do. And I think that shows very legitimate growth, that the character is not, like, just cartoonishly head over heels for Katarina, but also still envies her so much and loves her so much that he'd be willing to give this up just for her. I think that's really, really strong character writing, and I'm very much impressed by it. But as he is pondering this, a certain brother stumbles into the room, that being Jeffrey. And Jeffrey, you know, he listens to what Gerald has to say. And so Gerald trusts Jeffrey enough to tell him everything. But I almost wonder if he was too trusting. Because again, like I said, it feels like Rufus is maybe working with or for Jeffrey. And the fact that Jeffrey ends his scene with Gerald after Gerald gets up and leaves by reading the note and then smirking, that tells me either he knows whose writing it is, he knows who wrote the letter in general, or it's his letter. And he's just smirking at the idea that his plane is going off without a hitch. Either way, it's a super solid episode, and I was so impressed. Gerald as a character has definitely grown on me quite a bit. By the time we get to this week's episode, I'm like, yeah, Gerald's great. The whole cast is great. I can't wait to see what the hell's going to happen in episode 4. I can't wait to see what the hell's going to happen the rest of the season. Like, because this is already super good. I cannot wait to see where we're going from here. But with that said, everybody, that is going to wrap up today's video, so I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, don't forget to boop that up snoot, share if you care, leave a comment down below, and of course, make sure that you hit that subscribe button, ring that bell, and set notifications to all. Let all of AndyTube know that you're here. And of course, before we go, as always, I want to give a big thank you to the good folks in the T Squadron. Look at these beautiful people. Look at all these beautiful names, and hey, if you'd like to join these beautiful people, there are 2 ways to do so. The first is by hitting that join button right beside the sub button. That gets you a badge next to your name, some emotes to spam in the comments, and of course your name scrolling past the screen here. Or you could check out that Patreon link in the description. Either way, it is super appreciated. So once again, a big thank you to the good folks in the T Squadron, and that is it for me. So, until next time, bye!